Hello, friends. This is Dorie Clark, and I am here with our weekly Newsweek interview show, Better. And our guest this week is Amy Gallo. She is the author of the new book, Getting Along. And we are going to be talking today about how to work with the difficult people in your life. And they take many forms, as you well know. There may be passive aggressive coworkers, there may be bossy coworkers, there may be people with a myriad of dysfunctions, but we're going to break it down and talk to you about how we can solve these problems. Amy Gallo, it's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Dorie. I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful. Well, we're so glad to have you. And for all of you tuning in, please feel free to type into the chat box and let us know who you are and where you're dialing in from, and also your questions for Amy about how to deal with the difficult coworkers in your life. So, Amy, you are a longtime writer and editor for Harvard Business Review. So, there's a million workplace topics that you could have picked to do a deep dive in this one. But how did you come to this one? And were your friends at HBR nervous?
I actually had an old boss email me the other day and say, I've read the whole book and I don't recognize myself in any of the stories. And I said, don't worry, you were not the inspiration. I don't think my HBR colleagues were nervous because they're wonderful people. And actually, it's one of the most sort of functional organizations I've ever worked in. But the inspiration for the book, I actually, prior to being a writer and editor, I was a management consultant. And I worked for a firm where we went into organizations and helped them figure out how to change their cultures, how to align their strategy with their people strategy. And I found that the most interesting thing to me was the dynamics in the room. So the content of the conversation was interesting, sure. Who doesn't want to talk about strategy, about organizational culture? But I was more interested in how people were interacting and how that influenced what actually got done. And so I was, in particular, was also saw how certain people really dominated a conversation, changed the tone of the meeting, stood as a roadblock in front of progress that people wanted to make. And I thought, well, this shouldn't be why we pursue this strategy or not, right? It shouldn't be based on the personalities in the room. And from there, just started when I did become a writer and editor, really decided to focus on workplace dynamics, the interpersonal relationships, and really wanted to help people who were feeling that stress of interacting with difficult people and wanted to give them advice, specific advice for how to actually get along better.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm Dorie Clark, and we're here with Amy Gallo. She's the author of the new book, Getting Along. We're also joined by my co-host, Philip the Cat. You can watch the tracking cow spots throughout the course of the interview. And we want to say hi to some of our amazing friends tuning in from around the world. We've got Moose, who's joining us here. We have LinkedIn friend from California, Michael's in New York, Celeste is in South Africa, Nancy's in Boston. Oh, Moose is in Gabon. Jennifer is in Jacksonville Beach. This is great. We have Parthiban from Bangalore. We have Wade from Houston, a LinkedIn friend from New Jersey. Amy is in Delaware. Jahanara is in Banbury, UK. Jessica's in Detroit, and Prashant is in Mumbai. We're glad to have all of you here, and type your questions for Amy Gallo into the chat box. So, Amy, one of the things that I'm curious about, there's a lot of ways that people can be weird. I think we probably all know this, but have you discovered in the course of your research, is there one pathology that is worse than the other? Is there such a thing as the worst kind of coworker we can have? Or, is it very much like every coworker is dysfunctional in their own way?
The sort of Anna Karenina. Yeah. So I definitely think everyone is unique in their own special way. And that's a polite way to say, difficult in their own way. I'm sure everyone watching is thinking, oh no, I have the most difficult coworker. These are the traits of that person. Of the 8 archetypes that I share in the book, I will tell you the one that I get questions about the most and the one that's most vexing to deal with is the passive aggressive peer. So someone who says one thing, does another, rolls their eyes, puts down your idea, but then it's the minute you're like, what's going on? They're like, nothing, I'm fine. Right. And those are the people that I think can be incredibly frustrating because it feels like you're shadow boxing, right? You have nothing to land on. Your attempts to be direct are completely dismissed. When you try to engage them, they act as if they're going to be engaged and then they don't. So to me, that is one of the most challenging behaviors that we have to deal with at work.
Oh my goodness. Well, don't leave us hanging here, Amy Gallo. What do we do if we're faced with a passive aggressive coworker? Do you have some tips that you can share to help us neutralize that?
Of course. So first thing to keep in mind with any of these archetypes is we all display these behaviors at one time or another. Who among us has not been passive aggressive at one point or another, right? And we do it often because we don't feel like we have power. We're afraid of conflict or rejection. We don't want to fail, right? There are very good reasons that we behave that way. So those are cute clues into to why or to how to deal with the passive aggressive behavior, which is the person likely feels unsafe or afraid of actually saying of what they're thinking and feeling in that moment. So whatever you can do to make them feel comfortable. Now, of course, you're probably thinking, why the heck do I have to make this person feel comfortable when they're being a jerk, right? But remember, the goal is to actually have a productive working relationship, not to win. So one thing you can do is normalize the fact that you're going to have conflict, right? It's normal for us to disagree. We want to hear disagreements. The other thing is you can also hypothesis test. So let's say you ask, is everything okay? And they're like, yep, I'm fine. Right? You can say, I get the sense there's actually something going on. If you don't feel comfortable sharing, that's fine. But I just wanted to let you know I'm picking up on it. Right. So you start to give them a sense of, I actually hear you. I understand you. And really try to focus on the underlying business issue or, sentiment that they're trying to express. Even if it's wrapped in a snarky comment, see if you can focus on like what they're actually trying to say and give them some leeway in terms of, okay, I don't love this passive aggressive behavior, but I'm going to let it go at this moment so that we can get to what we actually really need to discuss or do together.
Whoa, that sounds so mature.
Yes. And I will say, for those who are interested in the book, it does require you to be the adult in the room. And it's not fun when the other person's behaving like a child, but the other option is to behave like a child yourself. And my guess is you don't really want to do that.
So true. We're here with Amy Gallo. Her new book is called Getting Along. And if you're enjoying this conversation, hit the like button and hit the share button so that your friends can benefit from it as well. And we want to say hi to some of the great friends tuning in from around the world. Robin is here from Alabama, Catherine from Atlantic Canada, Ligia is in Brazil. We have Diana from Columbia, South Carolina. Robin is joining us. Jeannie from Southern California. Lupe is here. Miriam is in Malawi. Ufuk is from Turkey. And Zeke is from San Benito, Texas, the center of the universe. Absolutely, Zeke. Shirley is in Israel, and Patricia's in Stockton. And Thomas is joining us from vacation in New Mexico. That is some dedication, Thomas. Thank you for that. We appreciate, the above and beyond. We love it. And we have some great questions, Amy, who are coming in from some of our great folks. So Lisa has a quandary that we'd like your help with. She says, how do I deal with a group of coworkers that are the same level as I am, but they look to me for direction and then they argue with me? That sounds very tricky, Lisa. What do you think, Amy?
Yeah. So you're dealing with some interesting power dynamics, right? These should be peers who you're collaborating with together, but they're treating you as someone who can give direction, and then they want nothing to do with the direction, or they want to argue about it. So I think that one of the things you can do is have sort of a meta conversation where you, instead of in that moment, why are we arguing? You asked me for direction, but in a moment when you all are, say getting along, just had a small win, you can point to where things are calm. You can say, hey, I've noticed a pattern. We're supposed to be working together. I often feel like I'm giving direction and then we end up, things sort of fall apart. How do you think we could do this differently? Right. So sort of engage them in the resolution, and they may, to the passive aggressive peer point, they may just say, no, everything's fine. We like the way it's working. Yep, that's great. Right. Or they may say, oh, we have no idea what you're talking about. but at least you've put them on watch that you're seeing this behavior happen over and over. And sometimes even if they don't respond positively to you naming it, they will actually start to recognize it and change it a little bit. The other thing I would say, if they're looking for direction, rather than just giving them direction, try to engage them in the conversation. So what do you think? What would success look like? If this is our goal, what's the best way to get there? Something so they feel involved in the process of creating the direction and not just receiving it.
I love it. Those sound like great tips. We're here with Amy Gallo. If you want to learn more about Amy and her work, including her new book, Getting Along, just go to her website. You can check it out at amyegallo.com. That's where you can get the full 411 about her new book. And if you want to make sure you're never missing one of our weekly Newsweek interview shows, you can go to my website. It's dorieclark.com. You can sign up, download a free self-assessment, and you will be added to my email list, and you'll get reminders about fun things like this. And we want to say hi to some of our amazing friends tuning in. Susan's in Newcastle, UK. She's bringing the coal. We've got a LinkedIn friend from DC. Jillian's in New York. Hi, Jillian. We have Salisu from Niger, Mira from Jakarta, Sushma's in India, Brian's in Texas, and Gisela is from Stockholm. We are very glad you all are here. And a question came in, Amy, for you, and I think this is a good one. Prashant wants to know kind of procedural and also I guess, EQ kind of strategies here. If one needs to report a difficult person, if someone is really misbehaving here, should you go to your manager first or should you go to HR first? How do you deal with this sort of extreme situation like that?
Yeah. So let's talk about escalating, because this is an important question, because sometimes you will do all of the right things and things still won't change, right? And you do need to actually bring the behavior, the issue to the attention of someone who has the authority to do something about it. Now, I say has the authority, but they also need to have the skills and the motivation. So sometimes I hear a lot of stories, especially in researching my book, of people who escalated to their boss and their boss had no clue how to deal with the behavior, right? Or didn't care, right? Said, well, you can handle it. You take care of it. So really, when you're thinking about who am I escalating this to, think about who has the authority, who has the skills, and who has the motivation. That might be your manager. That might be someone in HR. And I would make sure you ask yourself a few questions before escalating. Number one, have I done everything in my power to try to resolve this? Because conflicts are best resolved at the level that they happen, if you can do that. Number two, how has this person who I'm thinking about escalating to handled previous situations in the past? Is there evidence that they actually will do something about it? They may not, in which case maybe you just want to go to them because you want a record. You want to go on record as reporting this behavior in case things go sideways later, right? And then the last thing is, what do you actually want from them, right? That same question. Do you want to report? Do you want this to be documented? Do you want them to get involved? Do you want their advice? Right? Make that very clear at the beginning, because sometimes you go and you just want their advice, and next thing you know, they've gone and talked to the difficult person, and things have all imploded. So make clear what you actually want from them and state that up front right away.
I love that. That's very helpful. This is Dorie Clark. I am here with our weekly Newsweek interview show, Better, and our guest is author Amy Gallo. Tracy's joining us here. Chris is joining from DC. Maria Angelica is joining, and she gave a flag icon, and I'm embarrassed to say, Maria Angelica, that I don't know what that flag is. I'm sorry. It's my terrible ignorance here, but welcome. We're happy to have you. Christina's from Trento, Italy. Pat is in Southwest Florida. Brent is in Virginia. Felipe is in Montevideo. Adnan's in Turkey. Lisa is in Jacksonville, Florida, and Rebecca's in New York. We love having all of you here, and the questions are pouring in for Amy Gallo. I love this one. Jahanara has a question, Amy, and they want to know, what is the best way to deal with someone who treats you like a subordinate when you are not? Jahanara says, I don't want to make a big deal about it, but at the same time, I want to let them know it's not cool. How can we navigate this so that we're not, freaking out, but we're setting the right boundaries?
Yes. Boundaries is the critical word there. And I will agree with you. It is not cool to treat someone like a subordinate who's not. So I would take the opportunity to either, I hear you that you don't want to make a big deal about it, but either have a sit down conversation where you can point to some very specific things. You asked me to do this. That's not really in my job description. Who else could we ask to do that? Right. To really be very specific about the things that they've done and direct them to what you wish they would do instead. Now, if you're not comfortable having that conversation, I think you can also very directly say, when they ask you to do something, just say, that's not something that I'm able to do. Either can you handle it on yourself or find someone else to do it, right? Try to keep the tone neutral, like I just did. You don't want to, put some snarkiness in there. The third thing also is to, help them figure out who else they can delegate to. So can you sit down and say, here are these things we need to do as a team. Here are these, you've asked me to do these things and not really what I have time for, what's in my job description. Who else can we ask to do these things, right? Yeah. So then you're directing them. What I really would encourage you not to do is to delegate them yourself, because then you're just creating a channel through which these things get done. I would, as much as possible, push back. And it is also fine to just say, no, I can't do that, right? Sometimes people will be mad at you, and that's okay. Sometimes people will get frustrated or annoyed, especially when you set boundaries. But as long as you do that in a way that's really, watching out for your own career, your own time, and you do it in a way that is kind and compassionate to them, there's no reason they should get mad, but you just let them deal with that and move on.
Great points. I'm Dorie Clark. We're here with Amy Gallo. We're talking about how to work with difficult people. And we're so glad that Inda's joining us. Carla's joining from Orlando. Lupe's in Arizona. Todd's in New York. We have a LinkedIn friend from Research Triangle Park. We have Nadia in Cleveland. Patricia's in Hamburg. Dave is from Saskatoon. Melanie's in Raleigh. Mozgan is from Iran. And Mandy is from Calgary. We are so glad you are here. The questions are pouring in. And Amy Gallo's new book, you should get it now. It's called Getting Along. And if you want to make sure that you are following all of these weekly Newsweek interview shows, just follow me on LinkedIn. I'm DorieClark.com/LI. That'll take you to where you need to go. You can follow me there, subscribe to the weekly newsletter, and you will get reminders about all of this. And so, Amy, a great question poured in. It's a little bit long, so I'm going to do a synopsis for you, but it's from Maureen. Thank you, Maureen, for the question. She says, I have a colleague who's triggered around a new project that's far outside of their comfort zone, and it requires them to learn a lot of new things. I'm heading it up, but this person is a peer. The last meeting ended in them stating, I refuse to believe that is true. Except Maureen says, there's a lot of data and everybody else is supporting it. So what do you do if you have a fact denier who is on your team and refuses to believe that is true? What would you do there?
Yeah, two things stick out to me about this question, which I love. I don't love that you're in this situation, Maureen, but I love that you're asking this question. Number one, about the I refuse to believe that's true. What you don't want to do is come back and say, well, there's this evidence, right? Then you're getting in the true false dichotomy, tug of war. Instead, you might ask a question like, what would you need to believe that this was true? Right? What evidence would help you understand this? Or what are you looking for to believe that this is true? Or what's holding you back, right? The rest of us feel this is true based on what we're seeing. You seem to be an outlier. Help us understand your perspective. What's standing in your way of getting on board with this idea, right? So instead of you're wrong, you're right, you're wrong, you're right, it's more about what actually do you need to see that. The second thing is, you mentioned, Maureen, that this person is in over their head. So this person has a lot of insecurity. And actually, chapter 3 in my book is about dealing with insecure managers, but the advice applies to whether it's a peer, direct report, anyone who feels insecure, is really try to help them see what they're doing right. Because
I think it's possible that Amy Gallo has frozen there, but oh, there she
I'm
is.
back. Sorry about that.
You're back. You're back.
It's the magic of the internet. Where did I go out?
Oh boy. I don't, can you repeat like sort of
Yeah.
just your last little segment of that? Thanks,
Sure,
Amy.
sure. Yeah, of course. So the given that they're struggling with their confidence, right? They're feeling underwater. We really think about also how can you help them with that insecurity, which is a natural feeling most of us feel. So how can you point out what they're actually doing right? Why they're on this project? It has to be genuine, right? If there's someone who struggles to make decisions, don't say, oh, you're on the project because you're so decisive, right? It can't be fake, but what is it that they actually bring to the table? And really try to emphasize that so you help build their confidence. Now, again, when someone's making things difficult, the last thing you want to do is have to flatter them, help them bring them along. But don't think about it as generous to them. Think about it as generous to the team or to yourself, because you're going to have to deal with their insecurity less if their ego is a little bit calmer.
Nice. That should be very helpful. The new book is Getting Along by Amy Gallo, and we have great friends tuning in from all over. Suman is joining from Bangladesh. I hope you're keeping dry, Suman. Sorry about those floods. Hope things are better. We have Devang joining from Ahmedabad, India. We have Fatia from Egypt. We've got Doreen in Ohio, and we have Sapna joining. We have Robert in Berlin. Jessica's in Colombia. We have all kinds of great friends joining. So thank you for being here. Rita Marie's in Ireland. Phaedra's in Atlanta. VJ is in Sacramento. So thank you for joining, everybody. And a great question came in, Amy. Doreen wants to know, what do you do when someone's playing the victim all the time? I know this is one of the types that you talk about. Yeah. So how would you deal with this pernicious trait in a coworker?
Yeah. Well, one caution, and I know I have a lot of caveats, but the dealing with difficult people is a nuanced art, right? So number one, you make sure you're not actually calling someone playing the victim when they actually are the victim. So, sometimes people are the target of microaggressions, mistreatment, right? You have to be sure that someone is not actually being victimized in the workplace. Now, that said, there are people who play the victim, right? They have no ability or no agency, right? To change things in the workplace. They feel like everything negative is directed at them. One of the most important things you can do is really try to restore their agency. So they might say, well, we have no control over that, right? Or I don't know, everyone just gets mad at me whenever I do something, right? You can say to them, well, if you were in charge, what would you do? Right? If you had the power to change this, what would you do? Because you're just trying to give them a sense that they do have some control. Now, if they genuinely have no control over the thing that they're complaining about, don't try to fake them out. Don't try to make them feel like they have control if they don't. But chances are they do have some sense of control. And that's usually what we mean by plays the victim, which is they act as if they don't have agency when they actually do. So try to give them that sense of agency. The other thing, you can also be direct with someone who plays the victim and say, when you say things like that, I think it really hurts you, right? Because it sounds like you're powerless, which I know you're not. And that can be a hard thing to say. I would make sure your tone is neutral. You're not sort of really pushing on them, but helping them to see that when they do that, it's not productive. That often can help raise their awareness, but you have to be really comfortable and secure with your relationship with them to try something as direct as that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Amy Gallo, author of Getting Along. I'm Dorie Clark. This is our weekly Newsweek interview show, Better. And we're talking about how to get along with difficult people. How can you work with these folks? And we're getting some great questions coming in from the audience, Amy, about different use cases here. So Wendy wants to know, how can you work with someone who's really sensitive or emotional? Now, this is a little different than somebody who's playing the victim. Maybe this person, you tell them anything, and if they perceive it as like mildly critical, they start crying, or they just make a big deal out of everything. How can you cope with a situation like that where you have to kind of be walking on eggshells?
Yeah. So one thing I will say about emotions is we have different tolerance levels for emotions at work, particularly emotions that we find uncomfortable, like crying or acting hurt, right? And those are, you may have a less, high tolerance than someone else. The idea that we wouldn't bring any of those emotions to work is really not reasonable. So try to make sure that you're not projecting your discomfort on that person. Let them have the emotions they're having. Now, if they have that emotion and it completely shuts down the conversation, or they use that emotion to stay, to be a roadblock in progress on a project, for example, or for, to just, implode a meeting, that's a problem, right? That's when the emotions and sensitivity become an issue. In that case, you might say, okay, we're going to pause this conversation. Let's come back when we're all feeling calm and centered, right? Not you need to calm down. You're having a really hard time. No one likes to be assigned thoughts and feelings because you're probably not going to get it exactly right. So give that person some space and time and then come back and even ask, like, do you feel equipped to have a productive conversation right now? Again, don't try to stigmatize the emotion. That some of us just don't have as much emotional control as others. The other thing, again, you can, depending on your relationship with this person, you could have a direct conversation if you feel comfortable doing so. If you feel like they'll trust and listen to you, you might say, when you get upset, or when you start to cry in that meeting, this is the impact it has on the team, right? Or this is the impact it has. Oh, hi, Kitty. Right. on I wish my dog. By the way, I have a 50-pound dog. If he tried that, we'd all be in trouble. But back to the emotionally sensitive person. You can help them raise their awareness around how that behavior actually impacts. The other thing I would posit is that person probably has some insecurity. So going back to the previous question, can you focus on what they do well? Can you help them build a little confidence? And this applies to any type of difficult person we've talked about so far, is if they do something that is counter to that. So let's say they handled a stressful situation with, calm, they're staying cool and collected. Point that out. Just be like, wow, that was stressful. And we all managed to get through it together and without freaking out. That was awesome, right? Try to reinforce the behavior you want to see.
I hear that works for kitties and dogs too. So
And children.
Reinforce the good. Yes, absolutely. We're here with Amy Gallo, author of the new book, Getting Along. We want to say hi to Pooja, who's tuning in from North Carolina. Sarah's in Nairobi. We've got Asha in the UK. We are very glad you are here. So many great questions. We probably have time for maybe one more, Amy Gallo. So Honita has a great question about another type of pathology we might see. She wants to know, what do you do if people keep wanting to give you advice? She says, I feel really sad if they keep giving me a talking to. So if somebody just, you didn't ask for it, but they just keep giving you feedback, yes, what should you do in that situation?
Oh my gosh, there was a great New York Times article about how giving advice is the new small talk, right? Anyone, you say something like, oh, I'm feeling stressed, and people are like, you should take a bath, and you should, people just feel this need to really, intrude upon your mental space. I feel you on that question. And I would say one of the things is just to set boundaries. When someone starts to give you advice, say, oh, I wasn't looking for advice. I just wanted to tell you how it's feeling, right? Or, the other thing is you could just say thank you and then don't listen to it. That's one of the most important career pieces of advice I've gotten in my entire career, which is thank them for the feedback, decide what's useful to you, and dismiss the rest. So, if you're getting feedback or advice that you just don't find helpful, you can say, think about that. But you don't have to do it. You don't have to even respond beyond that. But more than likely, I think people don't realize they actually think they're being helpful. And so I would try in the moment to just say, oh, thanks, that's helpful. Or not even say that's helpful, but thanks, I hear you. Actually, what I'm looking for is, whatever it is you're looking for instead. I just wanted you to hear about that, or I just wanted to tell you how I was feeling, and then move on. Just put that out of your head. You don't need to take it in.
That's right. Marshall Goldsmith has a wonderful saying would be the wrong word because it's not a saying. It's actually a hand gesture. He likes to encourage us that whenever something kind of bad happens, he's just "Hmm."
Yeah,
just, let's just have it fly away like a little birdie.
exactly.
So we can
I
practice
love that.
that.
I love that. And I remember so clear this moment in my career when someone sent me this really harsh email, and our last questioner, I relate so much with 10 points. It was like bullet pointed. It was actually numbered of things I should do differently. And I had this moment, I was like, okay. And like, I caught like, well, first of all, I swore a lot at my computer screen. And then I copied and pasted it into a Word doc. And I just deleted the ones I didn't want. And there were I didn't even believe. And there were two things that were actually really useful. So I did find something in it, but the rest, goodbye. I just let that go.
Wow, I like that. That's great. I actually keep a file of negative emails that people send me so that I can sort of hate quote them later and make fun of them in my emails.
Dorie, it's so funny. In the book, I give the advice to keep a compliments folder. I would
Mhm.
never think to keep the hate emails. I try to delete those as soon as possible. But maybe what you're doing is much healthier. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like if I can use it as fodder to like make fun of them and mock them years later, then that's a win for me. But I also keep a folder of compliments. So I'm with you there, Amy.
Good, 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 good. Yeah, actually,
Yeah.
chapter two in the book, I did actually, there is an email that I quoted verbatim of someone who was really difficult, and it felt so good to put it out there in the world. I obviously didn't use their name, but I put it out there in the world, and now everyone gets to see what he did.
I like it. I like it. Yeah, karma is a tough one. It comes around. Well, we have been talking with Amy Gallo. If you want to learn more about her work, check it out at amygallo.com. Her book is called Getting Along. It is about how to deal with all those wild and crazy people in your office. And I'm Dorie Clark. You can tune in every week. We're Thursdays, noon Eastern, 9 Pacific, 5 o'clock in London. Amy Gallo, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Dorie. This was so fun. Great questions from everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.